What you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
This podcast is sponsored by Jackson Creative, a custom communication agency located in downtown Hickory, North Carolina, specializing in online content creation. To learn more, visit thejacksoncreative.com. Jackson Creative, we tell your story.
Footcandle Films. Film news and reviews from two guys who really like movies.
This episode is brought to you by the Footcandle Film Society. For a schedule of upcoming screenings and membership information, visit the Society's website at www.footcandle.org.
Hello and welcome to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. My name is Alan Jackson. I am co-director and co-founder of the Footcandle Film Society and the annual Footcandle Film Festival. With me across the Zoom channel here is the other in that co-director and co-founder, Mr. Chris Fry. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Looking forward to talking about movies with somebody outside of the people that are quarantining in my house. So that would be you. So this is good. This is exposure with the outside world, which is nice.
Yes, I was going to say we have been relatively limited in our discussion time to talk. Normally, you and I, we work together in the same kind of environment. So normally, if we have movie news to chat about, we have an easy way of doing that, just offices right next to each other. Here in the last month or and a half or so, that's been a little more strained. So it's just these Zoom calls we have to record the show. So we have a lot of catching up to do, I guess, in a way. Unfortunately, to balance that out, we don't have a lot of film releases or new films to discuss. So we've got a little bit of a trade-off there. Less time to talk about these, but fewer films to talk about.
Are we going to fill that time with like how we've been making masks or bread recipes, or do we have some? We'll have some movie news, right?
We'll have a little bit, and
Okay.
then I think we'll jump to the new section about bread making. That'll
Okay.
be kind of a new segment we start carrying forward, and then a wide variety of different unique mask designs I think would be great as well. So we are introducing a few new segments. No, actually, you know what? I think we've got enough to cover film related today in the show. So I think we're gonna focus on that, and in doing so, this is again our film review discussion show. The main thing we do in our film, our podcast episodes every time we get together is we do a review a couple of films, new films. Today we have two new films to discuss, both of them more or less making their premiere online in the midst of the times we're in right now. They are director and writer Kitty Green's The Assistant, and then we'll also be discussing Extraordinary, the supernatural comedy horror starring Will Forte and several others. So those will be the two films we'll be reviewing and discussing, both films available online for rental or purchase as at the time of this recording. Then we'll move on to some movie news items where we highlight a few upcoming projects. Again, the news is a little scant, but we did find a few interesting nuggets to talk about happening in the film community. And then we'll end the show where Chris and I both share a recommendation of a film that we think is worth checking out. Both films being ones you can find at home online, available for you to see. So Chris, we do have enough to talk about to make an episode. So let's go ahead and jump right into it if you're ready.
Sounds good.
All right, let's go into our first review. It is a film by writer and director Kitty Green. It's called The Assistant.
Welcome. Have a seat. Whatever's going on, you can tell me. That's what I'm here for. You're relatively new to the company.
I mean, I've been working here for nearly 2 months.
And you're under a lot of stress. Entry-level jobs in this industry are tough, right? Long hours? First one in, last one out.
Good night.
You're smart. You have to be smart. It's a tough job, but I can see that you've got what it takes.
I want those new pages before I get on the plane.
He promised them first thing.
Where we at?
200K in 2 points.
That's bull.
Maybe you can put in a good word for you.
No, he'll hire externally. Listen, his schedule has shifted. Does 7 p.m. work?
Still at the hotel or?
Yes. What?
This is turkey. I said chicken.
There's a girl waiting.
Oh, her. She's been here before. A few times.
What is it?
The wife. Say he's in an important meeting.
No, say he's in a screening.
Where is he? What did you say to him? What did you say? They told me you were smart.
I overreacted.
It was not my place to question your decision. I will not let you down again.
You know you can always come to us, right? Come to us first, okay?
The last 2 checks don't have a name or anything, just the dollar amount.
Ignore it.
Okay, and will he know what it's for?
Yep, he'll know.
I wouldn't sit there.
Never sit on the couch.
Here and here, initial here, sign there.
Do I need a lawyer or something?
Do you have a lawyer?
What happened? Where'd you go?
I was worried for this girl. I mean, they were just like laughing about it.
Can you deal with this?
Hi, why me? Who was that?
Wasting my time.
Your mom and I were excited for you. It's a great opportunity.
What can we do?
Do about what?
Chris, in Kitty Green's The Assistant, we have a searing look at one single day in the life of an assistant to a very powerful executive, an executive in the film-related industry. We come to find out. Julia Gardner stars as Jane, this assistant, and throughout the film, we watch her basically following her daily routine. We learn that she's been in this job for about 5 or 6 weeks. And over this time, even during the course of this one day, she grows increasingly aware of the insidious abuse that threatens her position and her overall satisfaction and her feeling of comfort within her job. Chris, we have a really interesting film here in that this is a film that really is made up of, as the summary just said, it's really a lot of glimpses. It's an interesting film that we have moments that are showing us throughout the span of a full day, which for Jane is a very long day, seems to start probably 6 or 7 in the morning and goes until darkness outside at nighttime. And we're watching these moments, we're watching these instances that start to build this picture of what type of work environment she's in and the kind of person she's working for. Obviously, in the scope of how this relates to more real life situations, we've just been going through the Harvey Weinstein crisis in the past couple of years, where all of this information about him has been coming out as far as his role as a film executive and the predatory type of nature he'd taken with actresses and other women in the industry. So, Chris, it's a very, very important topic, one that is obviously on the mind of writer and director Kitty Green as she wrote and put together this film. My question to you is, such an important topic worth discussing. Did the film do enough in exploring this topic, or did you feel like maybe it didn't go far enough, or did it leave you wanting in terms of how to best describe and discuss this kind of a very, very alarming and disturbing situation in the workplace?
Well, I think Kitty Green's background, she's made some documentaries, and one of the ones specifically, I think I've recommended it on the show. I can't remember if I did or not, but I think I have, was 2017's Casting JonBenet. And it was a documentary, but in it, and that was, about JonBenet Ramsey, who was kidnapped, killed, or disappeared. And it was but she took members of the town where JonBenet and her family live and actually cast them in the documentary to do some recreation scenes. It was this very it was a very layered documentary, but it had some fiction elements and had some, narrative elements that they threw in there. It was really interesting and fascinating in a way to kind of get at truths in kind of an odd way. Mm-hmm. With The Assistant, I feel like you can tell her background in documentary because it takes that framework that you mentioned of a single day. And it starts very early in the morning and goes till very late at night. And, things aren't rushed. Dialogue is very natural, if maybe kind of minimal. but there are breadcrumbs that start really early on about, an earring left on a couch or certain appointments having to be moved around because the official, the I guess her boss guy
Executive,
is,
yeah.
he's indisposed or he's doing, it's just, and, wife calls for him and things just, keep happening, but it's never really pushed in your face. It's just slowly laid out. And I think that gives a sense of something, nobody, me being a male, me not being in one of these positions. Yeah, I have no idea what it's really like, but something about the gradual nature of it and the heaviness of the film to me just was pretty accurate, and definitely didn't leave me wanting more because I felt like by the end the weight was crushing.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how and then, even from the very first shot, you can tell Kitty Green, she's a established filmmaker. There's just this car idling outside where Jane's going to come from, her apartment or townhouse, and they just set it there, and you can tell it's dark and it's quiet, but it's just something about it is kind of weighty, the lighting and everything, and it just, that weight never lets up. Just never lets up.
No, I appreciated this film quite a bit. I'm like you, that I didn't need any more, because after the one day, it was pretty daunting to watch. And again, I mean, people may be hearing this and thinking that it's just going to be this completely really, really grueling situation. And it's not. It's just this slow build of everything in a one typical day. That's the thing I think you have to remind yourself at the end of the film. This was one day,
right?
One single day, where she's been in this job for weeks now, and one single day. And we had several of these things and moments come up throughout the day that just paint this much, much more alarming picture of what she's dealing with. And I think the film did a great job of showing us that typical day. I think we're led to believe that yesterday was probably very similar to today. Tomorrow is going to be very similar to yesterday. And that's the scary part, is that you realize you're just watching one day. This isn't a 1 year accumulation of everything that's going on. This is one single day in this person's life. The film is really a series of glimpses, which I at first found difficult to kind of find myself getting into, but then really started to ease into that flow after a while, where it's just, here's a moment, here's another moment, here's a moment, all those individual moments on their own, not really mounting to much, but then you start piecing them together throughout the film, and you start realizing, okay, yeah, this is painting a very damning picture of what's going on. Especially by the time that another character is introduced, another assistant, I guess I should say, introduced into the role. That's when I think you get to the point of realizing, just like Jane, Julia Gardner's character in the film does, to the point of, okay, this is this is something a little bit more tangible that we have to deal with. Which leads to, probably to me, the most interesting scene of the film, but also probably the most disturbing scene in the film, the HR conversation.
Yeah.
Up until this point, Chris, we've had a film. It's a film of glimpses and moments and quick little asides of what was happening throughout the day. That's the dialogue where she decides to go visit an HR representative is the first and only time in the film, I feel like, where they really have a story or a plot that they're going to like drop in the middle, and it lasts for like 5 or 10 minutes. And then it goes back to the same style it was before. And I think it worked because it just shows us where she got to mentally. And even in that conversation, nothing is ever spelled out. Nothing's ever just so plainly said, here's the situation, here's what's going on. It's a lot of it is left to interpretation. A lot of it's left to innuendo, but it's just very, very upsetting scene to see how some valid concerns that are growing with her are treated by someone in a more corporate position, and almost as an acknowledgement of what's going on, without a little bit of a threatening nature to what was happening in the situation. So again, you hear about these stories of people who find themselves in a very distressing work environment where there are sexual misconduct, there's harassment, there's other situations, and people are encouraged to not report it or not say anything because it could hurt their career, could hurt their trajectory with the company. I think this HR dialogue scene, the perfect example I'm sure, what is a much more realistic situation for people in that kind of environment. So
Yeah, that HR scene, you're right. It could actually be taken out and made kind of into its own short film
yeah,
because
really.
the stuff on either side is supporting evidence, but just that little 5-10 minutes or something is it's really amazing filmmaking. It's very tight. It's well acted on both parts, and if anything, unfortunately, I don't know the actor's name, but the guy that plays the HR official, his like where he starts at in the meeting and then where he ends at the end of the meeting, it's like it's amazing. It's just starts like, oh, hello, typical appointment with HR, what do you need to talk about? And then kind of acting consoling at first, and then just you can see him like cement hardening or setting and being like, this is the stone wall. I hear what you're saying, but you're going nowhere. You need to appreciate where you are. Like just total yeah. So it makes that scene really amazing. And I could see that scene being like a clip of that being taken for the Oscars. If, she were to get nominated, or he was to get nominated for best supporting actor, or even just for writing, just showing that scene. It's like, here you go. This is what filmmaking is.
It was such a good scene. And I say that meaning that it's disturbing, upsetting,
Sure.
and something that I don't ever want to have me or anybody I know ever be a part of. But as far as the way it was paced and the way it was scripted, and just Matthew McFadden is the one who played Wilcox, the HR person.
Okay.
Even Kitty Green's decision in that scene to have him be distracted and almost interrupted at times by phone call, and just really amplified this nature, this position where you almost get the feeling of, yep, he's been here before. Yep, he's gone through this pace before. This has happened. He knows what this is going to lead to. He knows the questions to pose back to Jane to
right
get her off her center a little bit. It was played perfectly. So that whole scene was a great masterclass in scene without, where you don't go out and just explain everything that's going on, but you don't have to. If the acting and the dialogue is strong enough, you know exactly what's going on. And boy, it was something. So to have that right in the middle of the film, and then you're seeing the morning and afternoon scenes and glimpses in the first half, and then you're seeing more of the late afternoon, evening glimpses, and the aftermath of her going to visit HR. A couple of phone calls and dialogues happen. It's just it is the most subtle type of horror film I can imagine.
Yeah,
seriously, where it's like nothing is obvious, nothing is over the top, nothing is in your face, but just that building accumulation. By the end of the day, you're just drained and you understand where Jane is. And I really admired the film. I thought it was a really, really well-made effort. And may not be a more than one timer for me, but I think it did what it was needing to do, and help kind of illuminate kind of what some people I'm sure are facing in their lives. And it does feed in a little bit of the narrative we have about when people ask, why, if someone is concerned about sexual harassment in the workplace, why wasn't it brought up? Why wasn't it reported? Why wasn't it made a big deal about? And I think this film is a pretty good counter to that. Say, this is why, this is the situation. This is what is a lot more realistic in a lot of companies. So, very interesting.
I think too, the way the film is structured, it's kind of like a detective movie in a way, because clues are laid out for Jane or you, the viewer, and you kind of know what's going on, but everything kind of locks into place. And then she tries to solve the case by going to HR, and it goes nowhere. So then it's like, okay, the aftermath, like you were talking about, pieces start happening. It's like, okay, what is she going to do? How is it going to resolve? And it kind of doesn't resolve. So, telling too, and that was important, was instead of just focusing on her, it was really important that they had it did focus on her, but she had two male coworkers that were in similar roles as her. And the way they handled their job, and they did do things, but the way they enjoyed their job, you could tell there was a very clear difference between being a male and being a female in this job. And even how they acted, how they were treated or not treated, and how they treated her. It was very obvious. It's like, we're kind of all on the same position here, but you're female, therefore you are not as, important or as big as we
Yeah.
are, So yeah, it was just
Well,
not, and it wasn't rubbed in your face. It was just kind of subtle. And they kind of, air quotes, help her at one point when she's gotten in trouble. And you're just like, no, this is terrible.
that actually happens twice where they both just kind of, she's got to either write an apologetic email or write
Right.
something. In both situations, they just kind of gravitate over her shoulder to say, here's what you need to say. Here's the words you should use. And then of course she's the one getting the sandwiches and getting the food for everybody and just, having to answer the phone and buzz people. Yeah. It was very, very clear at that point, the role they saw themselves in versus the role that they felt like she was meant to play. And I think too, like you mentioned, it would have been interesting going into this film not knowing the subject matter, because
that's true.
That's the thing. I knew on the bare minimum it was about a possible sexual harassment or a more harassing work environment. If I didn't know that, it would have been truly like that detective film where you're being given these little clues in the first half hour and you're starting to build a case in your head and you're like, oh, I now know what's going on. Unfortunately, going into this, we kind of knew that one line synopsis. So I knew that's
Sure.
where it was going to be heading. But I think the film would have played really well without any knowledge going in, and to see at what point it triggers with an audience that something's really wrong here and how much it takes to build that up. So
we complimented, you called out his name, Matthew McFadden, as the Wilcock, the HR representative. And we've talked about Julia Garner, but I just want to make sure, like, this is a star-turning performance for her. Yeah, she's amazing in it. And there again, it's not as much a lot of flashy dialogue. It's just watching her, and she communicates so much just with her body language and her looks and how she holds her shoulders and what she's hearing. And, it's a really good turn for her.
Yeah, she's really good. She's someone I've seen in a couple other things she's been involved with. The TV show Ozark on Netflix. She is one of the leads on that show. And then she was also, do you remember the mini series about the David Koresh, the Waco? There was a mini series called Waco that she was actually one of the larger supporting characters in. So she's extremely talented. And yes, this film, I thought she did a really great job. You're right. Not a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of reactions. And it's a lot of just feeling uncomfortable and feeling that level of uncomfortableness that she has. And I think it all comes to an end with a phone conversation at the end of the film she has with a family member. You can just tell by almost the quivering in her voice, the hesitancy she has to answer questions. You can tell where she is. And I think she does a great job of that without non-traditional dialogue throughout the film. Yeah.
Something I thought was interesting too. And, in a bigger budget Hollywood film, there probably would have been a lot more examples of seeing famous people. Like, you think of something like Shortcuts, where that film was just, or not Shortcuts, but Player, the Robert Altman film that's just inundated with stars and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But there was one cameo, and it's not real flashy. It's just, she's in the elevator with Patrick Wilson, and he doesn't identify himself. I don't think he even says anything. No, but you see him, and you're like, oh, that's that guy. And you're like, was that really him? And it was like, it gets to the floor where they're supposed to get out, and there was this awkward, oh, you can go first, because you're a lady, and it's like this awkward, who's going to exit the elevator first? And it was kind of a brief moment of levity, but because you can tell by the way she acts, he is somebody famous. He is a male. She is this lowly assistant. And it's this awkwardness. So it's kind of heightened rather than it still was cute because he's obviously not, predatory or anything, but still it's just this, like, this is what she's dealing with all the time. Even something as simple as getting out of an elevator, it's, and I thought that was it was a slight moment of levity, but it was still a telling moment in the story. So I really thought that was a neat touch that they put on there.
Agreed. Yeah. Overall, I think we're both kind of on the same page with this. It was a really good movie. It was a tough watch. It's a very interesting topic to be discussing. But again, I love the fact that it's a much probably more realistic portrayal of what a harassing or lack of ethics in the workplace environment could be for someone. Much more realistic about how it's smaller moments throughout the day, and it's being pushed back anytime any concerns are raised about it. And again, I think this film did a great job of showcasing that for people who may not understand when they hear why people are hesitant to report situations in the workplace. I think this film does a great job of explaining what that situation truly looks like for people that find themselves there. So,
well, I'll say too, this important topic, important film, and a good example of how they approach the subject matter. A film from last year we never discussed on the show. I think with maybe the exception, I don't think we discussed it on the show, except that maybe around Oscar time we may have talked about nominations. But Bombshell, did we discuss that at all on the show?
We did. We actually did review Bombshell.
We did review it. Okay, so I don't need to go into detail, but everybody knew what happened at Fox News and how they came out with Roger Ailes. But the handling of that and the in-your-face nature of that, to me, this film was much more effective. It was a much more effective way of telling that story.
Yeah.
So,
well, probably a lot more realistic for what a lot of people find themselves in. Because even though this was a film executive office, we're never given any details on exactly, what type of person. Also, I should mention the fact that I thought it was a great choice to never show the executive.
Right.
Like, we never saw him. And you can barely hear him. Like only times we hear him is through a phone call, which the voices on the phone call are relatively muddled and faint. You can make out some of the words, but you're really meant to hear more of the tone and all than anything. But the choice to never show him, I thought was interesting. But the fact is that we don't know how big a company this is. We have no idea how big this person is. I mean, this person could be a mid-level film executive in the film world. We don't know. We just don't know the scope of it. But I guess the fact of the matter is it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's a one-up level supervisor or if it's truly like the biggest film mogul in the world. We don't know where this person falls in the scheme of things, but it doesn't really matter. It's the behavior is still the same, and the impact it's having is the same. So that's great. Great. Well, anything else you wanted to say? I mean, I think Julia Gardner was great. I think the filming, the cinematography was really good. A lot of still shots, a lot of long takes, but I think it was very effective in the way it built up the tension. And overall, I thought it was a really good film.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. It was one of the better independent films I've seen of 2020. And a kind of a dictionary entry for the whole show me, don't tell me, as far as what's going on in filmmaking. Perfect example of that. So.
Agreed. That is The Assistant, written and directed by Kitty Green. It is available on Apple TV, Amazon, any of the places where you could typically rent online films. It's available for you now. And both Chris and I highly recommend as something, if the subject matter you find intriguing and something that you'd like to explore a little further, and looking for a relatively low-key and slower paced film, but one that really has some emotional weight to it. I think that's The Assistant. So now, Chris, let's flip over and talk about a film very, very different from The Assistant. And this is a supernatural horror comedy film starring Mr. Will Forte as well as Maeve Higgins and Barry Ward. It is called Extraordinary.
Why don't we see ghosts every day?
Oh, leave me alone.
Most hauntings are so small, they go unnoticed.
Hi, this is Rose's driving school.
Maybe you could have a chat with my daughter, just to find out what's up with her. My name is Martin.
Oh, Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Martin, she's floating. She's floating, Martin.
I know.
What is evil?
Coming, my sweet. I'm doing an incantation. Now! Hear me, powers of the night! The blood moon is nigh!
This bloody moon better make me bloody rich.
Yes.
This is a satanic ritual.
Satanists! I woke up in the morning.
To break the spell, we need ectoplasm. You just have to let the ghost inhabit your body.
Like in Ghostbusters.
Oh, I haven't read that.
The plot thickens. Why does it have to be so unnecessarily gross? Black magic!
Aha! Your girl's got something.
Prick.
Holy
Extraordinary tells the story of Rose, a driving instructor living in rural Ireland who is gifted with supernatural abilities. Her love hate relationship with this talent comes into focus as she is hired to help a father prevent his daughter from being sacrificed to the devil by a washed up rock star, played by Will Forte, who schemes this will be the way he finally gets his career back on track. Comedies from across the pond have varying degrees of success in the States because humor, kind of often fails to translate. Alan, did enough jokes translate for you in Extraordinary to make it a success?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a
Okay.
fun time with this film, so I thought it was really funny. It's great when a lower I hate saying low rent, low budget, whatever it is a lower tier film that doesn't feel the need to put just so much money into special effects or over the top production, just letting the characters have fun and throw in some really bizarre situations, but while also adding in some interesting story elements and some nice little moments of drama and personal connection as well. So overall, yeah, no, I thought this movie was a lot of fun. This is one I kind of went in with no expectations and found myself really surprised by. There's a lot of moments I can pull out that I thought were really well done and a lot of nice touches and positive elements to it. Overall, the main key is I had a good time with the film. At the end of the film, I was able to look. My wife and I watched it together, and I said, "You know what? That was fun. I had a good time with that. That was an enjoyable film. Surprising in moments, both in its kind of shocking use of violence and also kind of very shocking situations at times too. Like we can get into a little bit more, but I thought it was all played extremely well, and I had a lot of fun with it. So, Chris, I'm curious your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so there are so many jokes in this film, and you hear the premise. It sounds like it's this kind of outsized, outlandish premise, and you think, okay, yeah, that's going to be funny for maybe like the first 15 or 20 minutes, but then it's going to kind of get old, and it's not really going to go anywhere, and it's just going to be boring and dumb after that time. For me, that was not the case. There were so many jokes, and most of them landed. And, I find that I could just sit here and list them all and pull like a Chris Farley, like, hey, do you remember that? Yeah, that was really funny. Like, Chris Farley, Saturday Night Live bit. But I really did have a great time with this film. And I think, seeing the trailer, I was afraid, there were some funny moments in there. And I was like, well, that's the other danger is now this film is not going to be anything much more than those scant funny moments. And then, the runtime's not going to hold for me. But that wasn't the case. There was so much here that I liked. And you mentioned both of us have thrown out Will Forte. That's because most people know him because of Saturday Night Live. He's not, he is great in this film, but he's not the main focus. It's,
No.
And you mentioned Barry Ward as Martin, the father, and then Maeve Higgins as Rose Dooley, who's like the woman who has the, supernatural powers or whatever. Those two are great and have great
so
chemistry together. And I've never really, I don't think I've seen either one of them before. So for two unknown people to be the main centers of this movie and hold their own and, hold their own against Will Forte, who was excellent. Yeah, that just shows you kind of, this is one of those comedies for me that definitely translated.
I really like Will Forte as a comedian. I think he's great. I like most of the stuff I see him do. And I went into this expecting that I was just going to look for his parts in the film and he was going to be the scene stealer in every moment. And I did enjoy his moments, but you're right. When it cut to, Maeve and Barry playing Rose and Martin, I enjoyed them just as much, if not even a little more at times. I thought they were just so great. Maeve Higgins as Rose Dooley in particular. She's got some great comic timing.
Yes.
She plays the sweet, but also uncomfortable with herself. And yet, just so much was right with her character. And it really just worked really well. And plus we've got some creative use of old VHS footage and moments throughout the film, which I thought was a nice touch and kind of both bookended the film and then was kind of brought up at one point as a plot point as well. So, it was good. I'm like you. I've just got a lot of moments of like, yeah, this part was great. And this is my favorite part. And, I like this line. So a lot of that. And I can't really find a lot to disagree with on the film, The runtime was good and tight. It was an hour 30. Didn't feel like it really wasted any time. It really moved the story along. And even though I could argue on a slight little bit, when they started kind of introducing this plot element where, okay, so basically Rose and Martin have kind of now gotten together to team up. Martin's daughter has been abducted, and she is now the intended person for a demonic sacrifice that Will Forte's character is planning on doing. And as they're trying to figure out how they're supposed to stop Will Forte's character from performing this ritual, they had to go around it, and it's kind of this contrived thing of where they've got to go and meet up with all these other ghosts to try to extract ectoplasm from these ghosts.
Right.
And you hear that and you think, okay, so that's just a way of moving the story along. We got to go reach all these 6 or 7 ghosts or whatever. But the fact that they're actually collecting the ectoplasm in a jar, a candle jar that's actually branded McGuffins.
Right.
I absolutely love. So it's basically, we know we're having to just try to come up with a plot point to get us down this path and have some really fun encounters with some different ghosts. But we get it, and we're going to have fun with it, and it's still going to be entertaining all the way around. So it was great.
That's an example of a joke with the MacGuffin thing that you could pick up on, or you could totally gloss over.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hurt your enjoyment of the film because there's so many other jokes like that. They make reference to The Exorcist and Ghostbusters, and May passes those off as like, oh, I haven't read that. Like she doesn't realize those are movies that Martin is. I mean, the mere character name of Martin, his name is Martin. That's his name. And it's like, just the deadpan delivery of that. Like, you're such a boring white bread guy, average Joe, that your name is Martin. Your parents couldn't come up with anything more imaginative to give you as a first name. Like, there's so many things like that just, this is one of my favorite comedies in a long time. And for it to be so under the radar, I think that helps, because that way you go in, like you said, with, the trailer looked funny, but we'll see. And then you come out like, wow, no, that was really pretty solid.
It really was. And, there's so many moments in this film that I could just, Well, and plus I love the fact that it would play with a lot of these norms too. So Martin, his wife, you find out as soon as you meet him, has deceased. But she's still haunting him.
Yes.
And of course you would expect it to be where he's, his wife is someone that's trying to look out for him and trying to help him and all that. And it kind of gets twisted on its head when you start to learn more about his ex-wife, and you actually kind of meet her in a way,
which is amazing.
It really is.
Yeah.
The use of the cigarette,
yes,
as a transition between he and his ex-wife is just so good. And, that's great. There's a quote car chase scene that, at a snail's pace, following the daughter floating, being brought into Will Forte's character's castle. It was just so funny, just the way that all went about. You've got great supporting actors too. I mean, even though we mentioned the 3 lead actors, the person who's playing Will Forte's character's wife, Claudia O'Doherty, as Claudia Winter, I thought was really good too. She was a lot of fun. And, so it was just a really funny movie. It was so good.
Well, and I think you mentioned how, there's only one big name actor that we're familiar with. The effects, they're not really slick. There were white sheets with holes poked in them used to denote ghosts. Paranormal effects of just a branch waving or pebbles moving down a driveway or something like that.
Well, which again, they kind of allude to the fact that most people expect ghosts to be like doing this major production. Really, a lot of it's just trying to get your attention with one little motion.
Right. And that, trying just to get somebody's attention. That's also kind of a nod towards Maeve herself. She's just this simple person who's lonely, who just wants attention, just wants to date somebody, just wants to meet somebody. And it's just so many things. The movie's great. And I will say the last shot of the movie, I love the way it subverts expectation. I won't give anything away. Not that I'd be giving away, but just the last shot. It's so, and the cut to black is so amazing.
They're so happy to play against expectations throughout the film. So, a supporting character just gets killed very kind of surprisingly that you don't expect, at one point in the film that, it was bloody but very funny the way it happened. The ending shot, the dialogue between two main characters, you're right, just perfect, exactly played against what you would expect it to be. Martin's ex-wife as the ghost, completely different than what you would expect based on the first half of the film. Yeah, so many things where they're willing to play with the expectations and just have fun with it, and it was great. So it was so good.
I'll say that kind of a summary of how I feel about it and what if people think they might be interested. It's imagine if Taika Waititi had made Scary Movie, this would be the result. And I look forward to, we haven't really mentioned the writer-director duo, Mike Ahern and Enda Lohman. I think I said saying their names correctly. I can't wait to see what they do next, because
Same here.
As well written as this film was, with all the jokes and how the direction was pretty crisp and efficient, I can't wait to see what they do next. So
yeah. Oh, and even though you mentioned the production, which yes was relatively low rent production work and sheets over people as a ghost, I actually kind of like the design of the final big bad character. I thought was pretty creative and creepy, and
it was
really good.
But it wasn't like over the top or anything. It was still kind of had this do-it-yourself aesthetic, and that lent towards the charm of the movie. If a movie that has horror elements could be charming, this would be it. So I think that was actually a bonus that they didn't try to make things too slick.
So it looks like this writer-director duo, they've only made some short films before. This is their first actual work on a feature film. So I agree with you. I'm excited to see what they can do next. They've definitely got some great comic talent, both in writing and just even in the pacing of the film to make this such an enjoyable watch. So I will just say in summary, I love this film. I thought it was super funny, had a great time with it, very creative and inventive. I will say for people who are kind of going into this blind, okay, it's a little on the bloody, gory side. It's a little more on the violent side than maybe you would think a light comedy might be. But despite all that, I thought it was great. I had such a good time with this film. So I'm so glad we made ourselves watch it to review it, because it was definitely well worth it. So it's great. That is Extraordinary, again, out on rental, Apple, Amazon, any of the typical rental services. You can now rent a copy of this film to watch in your own time. And just like The Assistant, these are two films that Chris and I sound like we're both very high and positive on. Two very different films, might make for an interesting double feature. I don't know if I necessarily recommend that as a double feature, but I think definitely however you choose to watch them, we both want to give strong recommendations to both films. So Chris, we're going to take a quick little break. And when we come back, we will do some movie news items, and then we'll also jump into our recommendations of the episode. So this is Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. We will be right back.
Hey, this is Moose from Street Circle Drive. That's the Hickory, North Carolina-centric podcast here on The Mesh. Be sure to check out our show and all the others at themesh.tv.
Welcome back to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. This is Alan Jackson and Chris Fry, both with the Footcandle Film Society and Footcandle Film Festival. And we had our reviews in the first half of the show of The Assistant and Extraordinary, both films getting very, very strong recommendations from both Chris and myself. So a nice double feature of films. It's always good, Chris, to have a show where we're both really excited and happy about two films that we reviewed. Doesn't always happen, but this is a case where we are both on the same page, and it's nice to have two really great films to be discussing. So let's move into some news items, Chris. And this is in our typical show, when we were in our studio on a more regular basis, we'd have little segments and things we do in our news segment. We're really just talking some general news items here, because honestly, there's just not a lot going on in the film community as far as outward communications about things happening with new film projects. A lot of film projects are still in a little bit of limbo, waiting to see when they'll pick back up production, when they're going to be allowed to have production again. So everything's kind of in a pause. So the amount of news coming out is pretty scant. But I did scour the internet, Chris, to find at least 3 items that I think were worth us discussing. So let me jump right into them.
Sure.
First one, this is a new film that will be coming out. It was just announced this week. This film will be premiering on Netflix on June 12th.
Okay.
This is another situation where I kind of equated a little bit to where when Martin Scorsese, the announcement was made that The Irishman was going to go straight to Netflix. It's a little surprising. It's not exactly the director and medium combo I would have expected for delivering the latest film from a highly acclaimed director. But we have another situation with it now. Spike Lee, his new film, Da 5 Bloods, starring Chadwick Boseman, it was announced that it is going to get released globally on Netflix on Friday, June 12th. So this is yet another one of those auteur filmmakers that I wouldn't have expected to go easily into the online distribution format for their film. Spike, just like Martin Scorsese and others, seems to be someone very intent on the theatrical experience and getting people to the theaters. But I guess in times like these, when you've got a film that has been done for almost a year and you're trying to find distribution for it, Netflix comes a calling. And sounds like from the articles I read in various places that Netflix had been kind of aggressively pursuing Spike Lee to try to see if they could be the carrier of his next film based on the success and critical acclaim of Black Klansman, his last film. So, so that is Da 5 Bloods is the film. Friday, June 12th will be on Netflix. And Chris, I'll just tell you a quick synopsis of the film and then you can let me know any thoughts you've got on it. So this film follows 4 Black war vets who returned to Vietnam in order to search for the remains of their fallen squad leader. So it's a wartime film, but yet it's like after Vietnam. So for the 4 veterans coming back to try to find those remains of their squad leader. And plus the promise of, quote, buried treasure. A little interesting there. Also stars Jean Reno, Delroy Lindo, Jonathan Majors, and Paul Walter Hauser. And then Lee wrote the script. Yeah. So
Paul Walter Hauser, that's the guy that was
involved.
Yeah. So Paul Walter Hauser, I don't know if we talked about, see there, I blank 2019 because 2020 has been so eventful that 2019 seems like it was 6 years ago. So, the film Richard Jewell came out and kind of came and went. It was Clint Eastwood's film, but Paul Walter Hauser was in that film.
Okay.
And I thought he was really strong. He plays Richard Jewell. And so I was kind of curious, like, I wonder what he's going to do after. And so he's going to be in a Spike Lee film. That is interesting. I'm interested to see that. And yeah, it is kind of surprising that Spike Lee is going to release something on Netflix. But if Martin Scorsese did it, I guess that's paving the way right there, because it's like, okay, here's a well-esteemed filmmaker, and he chose to do this. So yeah,
well, it always is a question for me. Okay, back when Scorsese released The Irishman, I mean, that was not a COVID-19 virus related situation at all. That was purely look, I've made a 3-hour film that I could either go to theaters or Netflix is giving me a really great opportunity to stream it on their service. So here I'm curious with Da 5 Bloods, if it is purely driven by Netflix is making an incredible offer and seems to be the best way to deliver it, or if it's we don't know the status of movie theaters. We've been sitting on this movie for a while, so let's just go ahead and get it out there. This seems to be the best way to do it. I don't know. I don't know what factors really led to the decision on this, but I will take it as a viewer, as a good thing. This means that in about a month's time from today, I'll be able to watch the latest Spike Lee film, which may or may not be showing at the a multiplex by that time. So that's overall, I'll take it as a good thing. So.
Yeah. And I'm lucky that I'm already a Netflix subscriber, so I get to see it, kind of for free. So, so that's nice. I'll mention with Spike Lee, I saw that this movie was coming out, but I didn't see any of the details. Definitely didn't see that Netflix was taking it, because one of the things that I did see that Spike Lee just put on Instagram, I think last week or so, he just put together this little clip montage of scenes from around New York. And you can go, if you're on Instagram, just look up Spike Lee and you can watch it. And it's to the tune of New York, New York, Frank Sinatra singing New York, New York. And it is so good. Maybe the waterworks started up towards the end of it. Because, you start off and you're like, okay, I've heard this song and everything. But just some of the images and stuff that he puts in there. And, and Spike Lee doing it too, it's not, heavy-handed pushing an agenda. It's just like, yeah, guys, let's, kind of stick together in this. And he's not in it. It's all just footage.
Yeah.
And it's just really well done. So that's something people could also, it's not, we're getting into recommendations, but you could seek that out on Instagram if you are curious.
Well, I know both of us were positive on Black Klansman. We liked that film quite a bit. And I felt like it was a good return to form for Spike Lee, where I felt like he'd been his films have been a little sporadic in quality wise for a while, but that Black Klansman, I think, really brought home and was to me a quintessential Spike Lee film that I was hoping to see. So I'd be curious to see if he continues that with Five Bloods or not. And of course, Chadwick Boseman in the starring role. I know he's been in some other things outside of Black Panther and the Avengers movies, but I really couldn't tell you much about any of those other roles. So I'm excited to see him in another high profile role, especially working with Spike Lee, to see what he can bring to the table. And if it's more than what we've seen in just the typical action movies he's been a part of. So
absolutely.
Great. So let's move on to another news item, Chris. And this one kind of alludes to, you mentioned this director's name earlier and during one of our reviews. I think in the review for Extraordinary, you mentioned this person, Taika Waititi. He of What We Do in the Shadows, Hunt for the Wilder People, and then, of course, Thor Ragnarok, the third Thor movie he directed. He's been kind of mixed around. And then, of course, Jojo Rabbit we talked about from this past year as well. So a lot of films.
He's slated to do, was it Love and Thunder?
He's doing the fourth Thor movie called Love and Thunder, which, yes, with Chris Hemsworth and I think Natalie Portman returning for that as well. That one, according to all the pre-buzz, is getting to be super hyped as a very off-the-wall movie once again, kind of continuing,
as you would expect,
kind of continuing the whole what he did with Thor Ragnarok. So, Star Wars. Let's talk Star Wars with this in conjunction to this story. Star Wars is in a weird spot right now, Chris. They've got some good success with The Mandalorian on Disney Plus. They finished season 1, and most people walked away from that having enjoyed that series and feeling like it was maybe a little bit more of the traditional Star Wars that people were looking for. But then we also had Rise of the Skywalker come out in December, which was not well received by a lot of people, kind of considered a low entry in the series. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people waning interest in Star Wars compared to previous years. But there has been a lot of discussion about people taking on roles within the Star Wars universe as directors. Taika Waititi will be directing and co-writing a new Star Wars feature film for theatrical release. So
that is crazy.
Not an episode of The Mandalorian,
he did direct. He did
direct an episode of The Mandalorian, but not anything going on with that necessarily.
Sure.
This is truly a Star Wars feature film, which at this point, Chris, the Star Wars feature film universe is completely wide open. We know nothing about any feature films, Star Wars wise. There were all the talks and supposedly deals with 2 of the great Game of Thrones head showrunners that were going to be directing a Star Wars trilogy. That supposedly got shelved. We've heard nothing about Rian Johnson's future involvement with Star Wars.
That's kind of gone away.
He was rumored to have been involved with his own trilogy that he was going to be starting up. That's gone away. There was talks of a Ben Kenobi, Obi-Wan Kenobi solo movie that was going to involve the actor. What's his name? What's his name?
Ewan McGregor.
Ewan McGregor was going to involve Ewan McGregor. That seems to go nowhere. There was going to be a Boba Fett solo movie that kind of got replaced by The Mandalorian. So anyway, really, there's nothing on the Star Wars horizon that I can tell outside of another series of The Mandalorian. So to come out and say that, yes, we're going to do Taika Waititi. He's going to have his own true Star Wars film. Now, they're not saying if it's a spin-off film. They're not saying if it's a standalone film, kind of like Rogue One was or Solo was. They're not saying anything details. They're just saying, yes, he will be directing it. And then alongside him, Emmy-nominated Leslie Headland is... Oh, I'm sorry. Let me back up. Nope. Christy Wilkin Cairns, who wrote 1917 and Last Night in Soho, which is the new one coming up from
Edgar
Wright that we talked about in a previous episode. So she will be joining Taika Waititi on the screenplay. So you've at least got some really good heavy talent writing this thing, Taika Waititi directing it. I'm curious, but again, I don't want to get my hopes up because it seems like every time some of these interesting projects, Star Wars wise, comes up, they kind of get dashed a few months later.
Yeah, and I can't help but think, since I'm assuming, if all the mojo falls back into place once, people are able to start filming and everything like that, you've had Ragnarok and people liked it, but some people were like, oh, it's too silly, and then you're going to have the sequel that I imagine will be along the same lines. So I wonder if by the time he gets to do a Star Wars movie, if people will kind of be like, I don't really want the silliness. I just want the straightforward Star Wars movie. Like I wonder how that'll all mesh together. I look forward to seeing it. I think it will definitely be different. But Rian Johnson came in and did something different with The Last Jedi and made a lot of people mad.
Yeah.
So I liked it, but a lot of people didn't.
I did too.
So I'll be curious to see how he meshes, because when he directed The Mandalorian, I think there was it the season finale that he directed? I know he directed the scene, and I can't remember where it fell in The Mandalorian, but it was these two stormtroopers having this like back and forth conversation, like about
it might have been the finale. Yeah.
Okay, about what to do with the Baby Yoda.
Yeah, right.
And they were like they were talking back and forth, and it was a very Taika Waititi like moment. I liked it, but you consider that within The Mandalorian, which is like a half hour type thing, as opposed to having that tone and everything stretched over a Star Wars movie. Not sure how it would fit, but yeah, I definitely look forward to it, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Again, Taika Waititi did direct the last chapter 8 of the Mandalorian, the last episode there. I think it'll be interesting. Again, I'm just trying not to get my hopes up. I mean, I just feel like all these really interesting projects, it all depends on how the box office fares for the other property shows in the property. So in other words, if Rise of Skywalker had been a huge critical success and really just set box office records for being the last one of the series, I think we'd be seeing a lot more of these projects fast-tracked right now. I think the fact that it did not do well, Solo, the last standalone Star Wars movie that was released, did not do well, commercially or critically, for most part. They've been thrown some bad deals, and they're now trying to figure out where they need to be on the Star Wars front. It's kind of funny how there was so much positive talk around when Disney took over Star Wars many years ago. And when The Force Awakens was released, everybody kind of felt like, hey, look, Star Wars is back. It's stronger. It's going to have some great stuff. After, I think, Last Jedi, so many of these projects just kind of floundered or did not do as well and lost a lot of viewers. So I think they're just in a tough spot trying to figure out what they're going to do right now. So it's very, very interesting.
Not to dwell, because we have definitely spent our mileage and all of our chips have been cashed in on Star Wars, and specifically The Rise of Skywalker. But during my home quarantine, I did finally watch Rise of Skywalker for only a second time. I'd only seen it once when you and I reviewed it. I watched it a second time because I wanted to give it another shot. And it still didn't work for me. And, that I was trying to say, I think when we reviewed it, was I blaming J.J. Abrams? Was I blaming the script? The actors, no, these people can all act. It's not that. And now that I've, taken a look back at it, I don't think I can blame J.J. Abrams, because he made The Force Awakens. And that's great. I liked it. Yeah, there were some things that I had problems with, but it's good. So you're like, okay, I think it just all comes down to, I think it's like the Disney Corporation and too many hands in the pot after The Last Jedi, and they were so afraid that they were going to lose basically the fans of Star Wars ruined The Rise of Skywalker.
Well, that's kind of I feel like it. J.J. Abrams is a good filmmaker and a good writer, and he's done good things before. And I think there are some moments in Rise of Skywalker that work, but they're fleeting moments. I think as a whole, the pictures. And again, I think it's anytime it tries to dip too much in the fan service, that just doesn't make sense in a lot of those cases. That's where I feel like the studio was just getting overly involved. And I think they were so afraid to upset fans. They created something that was about as generic as you could make it for your fans. And therefore it just wasn't really that great. It wasn't fun.
And I think too, and this is obviously no one's fault. And at the time, I think I remember saying, I think they handled it as good as they could. But from all reports and everything, I think Carrie Fisher, and Princess Leia, her character in the final movie was maybe supposed to be a little bit more integral.
Mm-hmm.
But, she passed away, unfortunately. And I think looking at the movie a second time, I kind of realized, you know what? I bet if she would have been around to, lend her talents, I think it could have helped the movie gel a little more, and they wouldn't have had to try to cut and paste quite so much.
Yeah.
Even though watching it the first time, I said, you were kind of wondering how they were going to handle that because she wasn't dead at the last film. How are they going to have her pass away? It was handled really well.
Sure.
But think what could have been had she been able to actually do it. And I think that would have helped a lot. So
well,
it's sad, but
if anybody listening wants to hear some more of our thoughts about Star Wars in general, you can probably about every third episode for the last several years, there's some form of discussion about Star Wars. So feel free to listen back in any of those episodes you wish to continue that discussion. Chris, but all this has just been prelude to the news item I definitely want to share with you now. And I am breaking the rules a little bit because this isn't technically a film related update, but yet I think we can all find the connections here to make it worthwhile discussing.
Okay.
Imagine Television Studios and CBS Television Studios are joining forces for an 8-episode scripted series based on a certain article that was published in Texas Monthly by Leaf Registrad that was titled Joe Exotic, A Dark Journey into the World of a Man Gone Wild. So yes, this is the article that prompted the Netflix documentary series that was all the rage at the beginning of this pandemic self-isolation period that many people went through. So of course you had a shared experience online of people watching the show. Well, of course, the immediate talk started up about, are they going to make this into a movie? Are they going to do anything? And who's going to play Joe Exotic? Well, so I think a little bit bad news is it's going to be a 8-episode scripted series instead of it being a film. It's a little disappointing.
Which right away, me too. Right away. I mean, I'm kind of, I think like most of America now, we're kind of done with Joe Exotic. I did watch it. But the last thing I want to see is a series based on what I've already seen this year. Yeah.
I think you could have made a really interesting film out of this on its own.
Film, absolutely.
But the person now attached to play Mr. Exotic, whose real name is Joe Schravogel, is Mr. Nicolas Cage.
That is interesting.
So I want to hear your thoughts on this. The only reason I bring this up as a film news is because, it is Nicolas Cage, and Nicolas Cage is a film actor. I don't think he's ever done television before, from what I can remember. I can't think of anything in his filmography that would be TV related. So having Mr. Cage, very unique, interesting actor who's made some interesting choices in his own filmography in the past, playing Joe Exotic. How do you feel about this, Chris Fry?
Well, as far as trying to pick somebody to capture the craziness of Mr. Joe Exotic, I think Nicolas Cage will have no problem. It will definitely be an interesting performance. Will that alone, I probably will. Because of that alone, because of that casting, I might watch the first episode just out of, curiosity, because, I've seen some of his recent stuff, some films he's made. Mandy, which was kind of a horror film that came out, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. The Color of Space, which just came out recently. And, Nicolas Cage chooses interesting things to do.
Mm-hmm.
Neither one of those were like some of my favorite films, but he did that film, Joe, that you and I saw a couple of years ago.
It was good.
That was a David Gordon Green film that he was in. Yeah. So, he picks interesting stuff. The fact that he picked this and it's a series, which is interesting that he decided to do that instead of a movie. But I guess, it's one of those things. He saw the Joe Exotic character, and it was kind of like when Anthony Hopkins was approached to do Hannibal Lecter. He's like, well, I can't not do this, because it's like, I see that character and it's like, no, that's going to be a really good character to play. So that is kind of odd, but
I will watch it just for the Nicolas Cage-ness of it all. And I really want to see how they play this guy. That's my bigger question.
So it's going to be a limited series that's going to come out on CBS, you said?
It doesn't say exactly where it's going to be broadcast. It's just this
Okay.
CBS Television Studios is producing it. But that could mean it could go. I mean, some CBS property goes to Netflix or goes to other places. I hope it's not a CBS All Access. You have to be a member and watching type of thing. And it's very possible it could be. I don't know.
Sure.
They haven't announced where it's going to be shown. It's just who the production companies are behind it. So
Okay.
I think it's interesting. Again, I'm kind of done with Joe Exotic as well. I'm not one who found the docuseries to be terribly well done and had a lot of issues with it by the end of the series. But I'm still very curious to see what a Mr. Nicolas Cage will do with this role. Could be almost the role of a lifetime in a way. So I'm anxious to see what he does with it. So
it'll be talked about one way or the other.
Absolutely.
For sure.
So those are our news items. So Spike Lee's latest film, To Five Bloods, going straight to Netflix on June 12th. Taika Waititi has been tapped to direct and co-write a new Star Wars feature film. And Nicolas Cage will be playing Joe Exotic in a CBS television show, limited series show here in the near future. So, Chris, great news, great reviews, but we have to end our show like we always do, where you and I both give a recommendation of a movie that we feel like is worth checking out. And this needs to be a film that can be watched online. So if you're listening to this and you want to follow up on our recommendation, the goal is a film that, within a few minutes of poking and clicking online, you should be able to get access to and watch at your own leisure. So Chris, how about you go ahead and jump in and tell us what your recommendation for the episode is?
Sure. And mine will actually have a slight bit of a news item to pair along with it.
Okay, good.
But so Alan, what do you know about the band Blind Melon?
Very little, other than I know their music, but I couldn't tell you much about it. I know the lead singer tragically died, I think, after the release of their second album, I believe, or second mainstream album anyway.
Correct. No,
that's
after
all I
their
know.
second album.
Yeah.
So I kind of the same boat. I have both of their albums because they came out when I was in college. Everybody probably knows the one song of theirs, No Rain, that was featured on their first album, The Dancing Bumblebee Girl. They had their second album. I liked one or two songs off it. And then,
Galaxy off their second album is a really good song. So,
it is.
Mm-hmm.
Their lead singer, like you mentioned, unfortunately died while they were kind of touring for that second album. And, kind of fell off my radar. Didn't really know, anything else about him. Well, one of my friends recently said, hey, there's a documentary you should check out. It's on YouTube and it's free.
Oh.
And it's called Letters from a Porcupine. And it was released in 2001. And a lot of what it is live footage of Blind Melon performing.
Mm-hmm.
And, me saying, I had both of their albums. I was one of those people that I liked the hits off the albums and didn't really pay attention to any of the other songs on the album.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this live footage really made me realize Shannon Hoon, he's got a very distinctive vocal style. He was amazing live. Like he just gave all his energy. He was a very energetic live performer. And the band, they were also really talented, tight musicians that, I never really realized when you see them live, you're like, these guys are the real deal. Nice. And sadly, they only had 2 albums.
Yeah.
So like I said, the documentary is basically, a majority of it is live footage from different performances that they did, featuring as well their performance at Woodstock, which was crazy, which I kind of remember when they performed at Woodstock in 1994, people were talking about, it was kind of a nutso performance.
Yeah.
But anyways, if you're the least bit interested in Blind Melon, I would recommend going on YouTube and typing in Letters from a Porcupine, and you can watch the documentary, and it's free. It's 83 minutes, so it's not too long. Kind of haunting that some of the footage that they're showing was shot less than a month before he died.
Wow.
And showing him performing and everything, showing him performing a lot of the new material off of the album Soup.
Yeah.
So if you do watch the documentary off my recommendation and you're interested in it, the kind of news angle here is that it was funny. I just watched it, and then like a day or so later, I saw a news item that Oscilloscope Laboratories, who is a production company that was started by, was it Mike D from the Beastie Boys? I believe one of the Beastie Boys started. I think it was Mike D. Anyways, his production company is putting out a documentary that's a film assembled from hours and hours and hours of camcorder footage shot by the lead singer, Shannon Hoon of Blind Melon. And it's going to be released from Oscilloscope Laboratories. And it tells kind of a intimate account of the band, their creative process behind making their music. And it also ends up kind of showing you the tragedy of addiction. Mm-hmm. Apparently, the lead singer was a big camcorder fan. Like he just was shooting all the time, would talk to the camera all the time. And they've assembled all this footage, and it's going to be called All I Can Say. It's going to be a documentary put out about Blind Melon. So
wow.
If you see Letters from a Porcupine for free on YouTube and you like it, then you can look forward to this other film that's going to be coming out sometime within the next year.
Did they talk in the documentary at all, Chris, about their North Carolina connections? Because I know they actually lived in Durham, Chapel Hill area for a while.
They did. They didn't. I'm hoping that comes a little bit more in the All I Can Say documentary that they'll put out. They kind of made a passing reference to them spending a lot of time together in Durham, kind of forming as a band. And by the time they got signed and moved out to LA, they'd been rehearsing and practicing so much that they were just insanely, well put together. And that shows in live footage and stuff. So they made kind of a passing reference to it, but yeah.
Well, yeah, just kind of a little synergy there too. So over the holidays, I was out west visiting family in the Seattle, Portland area. And my son and I actually took a tour of London Bridge Studios, which is where they recorded their debut album.
Oh, wow.
Melon.
Okay.
So there's actually a lot of photographs and other things in the studio from where Blind Melon had been there recording their album. So yeah, it's pretty neat.
Very cool.
Good. Well, I definitely want to check that out. So you said free on YouTube.
Yes.
Great. Mm-hmm. Even better. Love that. So let's go ahead and stay in the music documentary vein, Chris, if we can. A film came out on Apple TV, one of their kind of premier film events that, showcase that are for Apple TV subscribers, although I think it's relatively easy to get a free subscription, at least for the first year or so, with the purchase of basically any Apple product. I believe you also get Apple TV free for a year. So this film is interesting in that it's not your traditional band documentary. It is basically a stage performance of a live telling of the autobiography that the two remaining Beastie Boys member, Mike Diamond and Adam Horovitz, have put together. So we are showing, most of the time, we're seeing them on the stage with a crowd of people at a theater as they're telling their autobiographical story, complemented by photos and video that was running on a large screen behind them. Because Spike Jonze is the director, you have some interesting moments throughout the film, some interesting choices, some things they do a little more on the creative side. And I think the information they share is very interesting about their story and their history. They go through quite a bit of their entire span of career, and of course, talking about the loss of one of their members also later on in their career. So, Chris, I was looking forward to this, and I will say I am recommending this because I think it is an interesting documentary. I do feel like it was a little too safe. I felt like it was a little too scripted. I felt like it was a little too rehearsed, where I was hoping for something a little bit more real, something a little bit more raw, I guess. And I didn't quite get that, but I did find enough in the film to still recommend it as an interesting documentary to watch. If you have any interest in the Beastie Boys as performers, regardless if the only thing you know about them is the whole License to Ill album and Fight for Your Right to Party, I think it's fascinating. Probably the most fascinating part of the film for me was them talking about that phase of their life where they really were the most popular they've ever been, and how it was really as kind of meant to be a joke. It was meant to be a kind of a spoof on the kind of people they hated, but found themselves actually being having an audience made up of those people that they were really trying to ridicule in the first place. That was really fascinating to me. My issue with any kind of documentary that's based on an autobiography is that you don't really have the other people's opinions to mix in. You're really truly just hearing from the subject. So there are some moments in the story where I kind of wanted to hear others' thoughts on it. I wanted to hear other people's take on how they were as a band, as friends, as people in general, and I didn't get that. But overall, I still found it to be a very entertaining film that I think is worth watching. Just knowing that I kind of felt like there was some missed opportunities, and I still crave for a true Beastie Boys documentary that really goes full circle and lets us know everything, not just them, but the people around them in their orbit. I'll give you a perfect example. I did not realize that the Beastie Boys originally started out with a female on drums.
Right.
That was interesting to me and
Sure.
very, very fascinating. And I loved hearing more about that, knowing that they actually started more as a punk band and they were more into that than before they got into rap. And they talk about some of the full circle they had with the girl in their band, where they let her go, but then they kind of came back around to working with her in some way later on in life. And it made it sound really great that they kind of reconciled, but I kind of wanted to hear from her. I mean, I kind of wanted to hear how she felt the whole situation went. And that's where a good example where I just don't feel like we got the full spectrum because it was a very scripted, based on their autobiography film. So overall, I still enjoyed it and I will recommend it, but I do think there's some caveats to it. So Chris, you and I haven't had a chance to talk about this yet. What was your thoughts on the film?
I liked it. I didn't think it was perfect, but I did like it. Let me do a correction too. It was Adam Yauch who was the founder of Oscilloscope, not Mike Diamond.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. But Adam Yauch, who was one of the Beastie Boy members, and he is the one that has passed away. So the other two were the ones on stage, kind of narrating the documentary. Seeing what they did, I thought it was interesting. And they had to use, you could tell it was an event that basically, I guess in New York, they probably shot it over the series of like 2 weeks, and they did this performance every night and people would pay and come and see it. And these guys would basically stand up there and kind of do a spoken word performance for, an hour and a half or whatever. They do kind of make fun of themselves, but it is obvious they're reading off a teleprompter. And so, you mentioned that, you don't get other perspectives, and you get the feeling that it's also very scripted in a way that they're literally reading stuff that they probably said offhand when they made the biography or autobiography that you're talking about. But you still kind of get a sense of maybe it would have been better suited to that because you would have been able to get different perspectives. But it still worked. And I think it worked because of Spike Jonze, because he's known for doing things that are kind of odd and throwing people off. And sometimes you hear talk back with them and like Spike supposedly in the booth talking about an animation that was supposed to come up that didn't come up. So I think there is some elements of spontaneity sometimes that happens in the live performances. It does work. I think it could have been a little tighter, but maybe that's kind of true to the Beastie Boy aesthetic, as kind of throwing stuff up there, a punk rock way of saying, here it is, and this is what you have. So overall, it worked, and I would say that too, even if some things felt too scripted, towards the end, when they are talking about, Adam and his influence on the band and the fact that he's passed away, and here again, I'm going to mess up the names, although I think it is Mike D who ends up having to speak for the other Adam in the band because he gets too emotional and just can't talk anymore. And you can tell, like, of the two that are up there talking, Mike Diamond is usually the more kind of nervous person, where the other one's a little bit more practiced maybe and kind of delivers. He sits down on the edge of the stage and kind of tells about their last performance at Bonnaroo. And you can tell he's usually the more polished speaker, I guess. But when he gets emotional, Mike D has to kind of come over and just kind of borrow the mic from him and kind of, finish out the little anecdote they were doing. And so that lent some authenticity to it that maybe polished over some of my other feelings about, them reading off a teleprompter sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, overall, I did think it was good. Again, I had a few misgivings with it. I even voiced some of those concerns when we saw the trailer.
You did. Yeah.
I'm just a little worried it's going to be a too sanitized, too much self-aggrandizing version of the story. And there was a little bit of that. There was some humility in the film. I would have liked to leave in a little more, but I think there's a reason why more full feature documentaries with all perspectives tell a much more interesting story than ones that are solely written from the protagonist's own words. So anyway, That is
I think
Beastie Boys Story. I think it's worth seeing. I'll say
sure.
that. Yeah.
I was left. I think it's a great recommendation, something people can watch from home. You don't really have to have much of a subscription. I joined the Apple Plus thing. It was a free subscription for a week, and I canceled it right afterwards. And I joined specifically to watch that documentary. The one thing I was left wanting was footage of when the Beastie Boys, specifically Adam Yauch, joined Aerosmith on stage and played Walk This Way and basically chased Joe Perry around the stage. I wish, because he was trying to like annoy him and like guitar with him. I wish I could have seen that, because I think that would be very entertaining.
Absolutely would have been. That's right. All right. Well, that's Beastie Boys Story, my recommendation. So we've got 2 music documentary recommendations for you this episode. One free on YouTube, the other one basically free on Apple TV if you're willing to do the 7-day trial, and just remember to cancel it at the end of that if you're not planning on sticking around for anything. So Chris, I think we have filled the plate here with as far as our latest quarantine episode of Footcandle Films goes. Even despite a lack of a lot of new movies coming out, and despite the lack of movie news coming out, we still got quite a bit to talk about. So again, kind of a recap. Positive on The Assistant. Both of us very positive on this film. Both of us very, very positive on Extraordinary as a great fun movie to watch. Spike Lee's The Five Bloods coming to Netflix. Star Wars is getting Taika Waititi as a director and writer of a standalone feature film. Well, a feature film. Don't know if it's standalone, but at least a feature film in the Star Wars universe. Nick Cage will be playing Joe Exotic in CBS TV. And then our recommendations we gave. All right, Chris. A lot of stuff for people to chew on, a lot of stuff for people maybe to have reactions to, or questions, or their own opinions they want to share. How do they go about getting a hold of us?
You could send us an email to info@themesh.tv and tell us maybe a film that you caught up with during this time at home on your couch, and you can let us know about it. Maybe we'll review it on the show. You can also follow us on Twitter @FootcandleFilm. And then Alan and I both keep accounts on Letterboxd, and that's LATTERBOXD. And you can track what we're seeing on there. And sometimes we leave short reviews. Also, closing note, Footcandle Film Festival will be running September 23rd through the 27th. If you're a filmmaker and you're interested in submitting something, submissions will continue to be open until June 1st. So you still have a little bit more time if you'd like to submit something.
All right. Well, that is our show for today. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to Footcandle Films. Again, if you like what you're hearing and you want to visit us on themesh.tv, that is where you can find all of the Mesh podcasts. You can subscribe to any one of those shows. Subscribing is free, and it just means that you will always be notified whenever there is a new episode available to you. You'll get that downloaded automatically to your device of choice once you have subscribed. There's also a lot of other shows on the Mesh Network, too, we encourage you to listen to. But until next time, this has been Alan Jackson and Chris Fry with Footcandle Films. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next episode.
See you in the ticket, Ron.
Watch films in the company of like-minded people in the dark. Watch films in the underground. We won't let anyone know where you are. The films that don't make it to Carmike at the mall, or ones that were famous when Grandpa would watch films out of the reverence of the heritage of an art. Watch films through the courtesy of Footcandle Film Society.
Special thanks to Carpal Tuller for the show theme music. For more about Carpal Tuller, visit www.carpaltuller.com. You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.